We're going to discuss Gypsy and Dee Dee Blanchard. Um, Dee Dee Blanchard was born Claudine Peretti in Checker Bay, Louisiana, near the Gulf Coast in 1967, and she grew up there with her family in nearby Golden Meadow. And she was one of 5 children of Claude Anthony Peretti Sr. and Emma Lewis Glisclair. Relatives recall that she had a habit of stealing from her family, which they speculated was a form of retaliation for when things didn't go her way. And at some early point in her adult life, she worked as a nurse's aide. The family expressed suspicion that in 1997 she might have killed her own mother by denying her food. When she was 24, she became pregnant by Rod Blanchard, which is Gypsy's daddy, when he was just 17. Um, they named her daughter Gypsy Rose because Dee Dee liked the name Gypsy and Rod was a fan of Guns N' Roses. Shortly before Gypsy Rose's birth in July of 1991, the couple separated when Rod realized that he got married for the wrong reasons. And he resisted Dee Dee's efforts to get him to return. And she took their newborn daughter to live with her family. Now, Gypsy's childhood. Um, According to Rod, who um, remained to be involved in his daughter's life at some point, by the time Gypsy was 3 months old, her mother had convinced was convinced that her infant had sleep apnea, and began taking her to the hospital, where repeated overnight stays with a sleep monitor and other tests found no sign of the condition. And Dee Dee subsequently became convinced that Gypsy had a wide range of health issues, which were attributed to an unspecified chromosomal disorder. At some point, her mother claimed that Gypsy had muscular dystrophy and made her use a walker. Gypsy said that when she was 7 or 8, she was riding on her grandfather's motorcycle when they were involved in a minor accident where she obtained an abrasion on her knee, and her mother said that the doctors had given her a wheelchair and she needed to use it. Gypsy often went with her parents to Special Olympics events, and in 2001, when Dee Dee claimed Gypsy was 8, which she was actually 10, she was named honorary queen of Creole of Mid-City, a child-oriented parade which was held during Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Gypsy seems to have stopped going to school after 2nd grade, possibly even as early as kindergarten. Her mother homeschooled her after that, supposedly because of her illnesses were so severe. This was later believed that it was an attempt to isolate Gypsy to further her abuse, and Gypsy managed to learn to read on her own through Harry Potter books. Gypsy's father remarried, and Dee Dee moved in with her father and stepmother. And they later said that when preparing food for her stepmother, Dee Dee poisoned it with Roundup weed killer. Leading to her stepmother's chronic illness during these periods. During the time, Dee Dee was arrested for several minor offenses, which including bad checks, um, when her mother and father and stepmother began to regularly confront her about her treatment of Gypsy and the expressed um, suspicion about her role in her stepmother's health. Dee Dee left with Gypsy from New Orleans to a suburb of Sidell, and her stepmother's health returned to normal after Dee Dee left. In Sidell, she and Gypsy lived in public housing. They paid their bills with Rod's child support payments and public assistance. Dee Dee had been granted due to her daughter's supposed medical conditions. They saw various specialists, mostly in the Tulane Medical Center and the Children's Hospital of New Orleans, seeking treatment for illnesses Dee Dee claimed Gypsy had, which now included hearing and vision problems. While a muscle biopsy found no sign of muscular dystrophy, Dee Dee insisted that Gypsy had. She was successful in securing treatment for Gypsy's other um, issues. And she told doctors that Gypsy had seizures early every few months. They prescribed anti seizure medication, and several surgeries were performed on her during this time. And Dee Dee regularly took Gypsy to the emergency room for minor ailments. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in August 2005, Dee Dee and Gypsy left their ruined apartment for shelter in Covington, set up for people with special needs. Dee Dee said that Gypsy's medical records, including her birth certificate, had all been destroyed during the flood. And a doctor there from the Ozarks suggested they relocate to her native Missouri, and the next month they were airlifted there. At first, Dee Dee and Gypsy lived in a rented house in Aurora, which is in southwestern Missouri. Uh, during this, during their time there, Gypsy was honored by the Alive Foundation, which advocates the rights of feeding tube recipients, as its 2007 Child of the Year. 2008, Habitat for Humanity built them a small home with a wheelchair ramp, a hot tub as a part of the major project on the north side of Springfield. To the east, and they moved there. The story of the single mother with a severely disabled daughter, forced to flee Katrina's devastation, received considerable local media attention, and the community often pitched in to help the woman who now went by Claudine Blanchard. Um, she was also known as Dee Dee. The outpouring of support included many charitable contributions. In Louisiana, mother and daughter had almost availed themselves of occasional stays at the Ronald McDonald House during medical appointments. In Missouri, they received free flights to see doctors at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, free trips to Walt Disney World, backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts, um, where she was frequently photographed with Miranda via the Make a Wish Foundation. Rob Blanchard, her daddy, also continued to make monthly child support payments of $1,200, as well as sending Gypsy's gifts and occasionally talking to her on the phone. During one phone call on her 18th birthday, he recalls Dee Dee telling him not to mention her daughter's real age, since she thinks she's 14, she said. Rod and his second wife hoped to get to Springfield to visit, but for a variety of reasons, Dee Dee changed plans. She told her neighbors in Springfield that Gypsy Rose's father was very abusive and he was a drug addict and alcoholic who had never come to terms with his daughter's health issues and never sent them any money, which he did. Um, Many people who met Gypsy um, were charmed by her. Um, Dee Dee used physical abuse to control Gypsy, always holding her hand in the presence of others. And when Gypsy said something that suggested that she was not um, genuinely sick or seemed beyond her mental capacity, her supposed mental capacity, Gypsy recalls that her mother would squeeze her hand very tightly. When the two were alone, Dee Dee struck her with her open hands or with a coat hanger. Medical interventions continued, and Dee Dee and some of Gypsy's salvia glands, which is helps you swallow, were treated with Botox, then extracted altogether to control her drooling. Um, Gypsy later claimed that her mother induced drooling by using topical agents to numb her gums. The lack of salivary glands, coupled with side effects of anti-seizure medications, um, she was um, she was given, caused Gypsy's already few teeth to decay to the point where um, they had to be extracted and replaced by a bridge. Tubes were implanted in her ears to control her ear infections. Um, but there was a pediatric neurologist um, who saw that who saw Gypsy in Springfield and became suspicious of her muscular dystrophy diagnosis. He ordered MRIs and blood tests, which found no abnormalities. I don't see any reason why she can't walk, is what the doctor said. And he told Dee Dee on a follow up visit after seeing Gypsy stand and support her own weight. Um, Doctor noted that Dee Dee was not a good historian. After contacting Gypsy's doctors in New Orleans, he learned that Gypsy's original muscle biopsy come back negative, undermining Dee Dee's reported diagnosis of muscular dystrophy, as well as her claim that Gypsy's records have been destroyed by flooding. He suspected a possibility of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and Dee Dee contrived to gain access to the doctor's notes and subsequently stopped taking Gypsy to see him. So he was on her tail, just about. Um, the doctor did not follow up by reporting Dee Dee to social services, and I can't believe this because if he reported her, social service would have been called in. Um, he said that other doctors had told him to treat the pair with golden gloves, and doubted that the authorities would believe him anyway. In 2009, an anonymous caller told the police that Dee Dee's use of different names and birth dates for herself or her daughter suggested that Gypsy was in better health than they claimed. Officers who performed the resulting wellness check uh, accepted Dee Dee's explanation that she used the misinformation to make it harder for her abusive ex husband to find her and Gypsy without talking to Rod, and reported that Gypsy seemed genuinely mentally disabled, and the file was closed. Since 2001, Gypsy had attended science fiction and fantasy conventions like Comic Con. My husband's real big into that stuff. Um, Sometimes in costume, since she could blend in to the diverse communities in her wheelchair. At a 2011 event, um, she may what have been an escaped attempt that ended when her mother found her in a hotel room with a man she met online. Again, Dee Dee produced the paperwork giving Gypsy's false younger birth date and threatened to inform the police. And Gypsy recalls that afterward, Dee Dee smashed her computer with a hammer and threatened to do the same to her fingers if she ever tried to escape again. She also kept Gypsy leashed and handcuffed to her bed for 2 weeks. Dee Dee later told Gypsy that she had filed paperwork with the police claiming that Gypsy was mentally incompetent, leading Gypsy to believe that if she attempted to go to the police for help, they would not believe her. Sometime around 2012, Gypsy, who continued to use the internet after her mother had gone to bed to avoid her tightened supervision, made contact online with Nicholas Godejohn, a man around her age from Big Bend, Wisconsin, whom she said that she met on a Christian dating site. Godejohn has a criminal record for indecent exposure and a history of mental illness, sometimes reported as dissociative identity disorder, meaning multiple personalities. Um, and I just lost some place. He also has his own spectrum for autism. Um, in 2014, Gypsy confided to 23-year-old neighbor Aaliyah Woodsman Aaliyah, who, unaware that Gypsy was closer to her own age, considered herself a big sister. That she and Godejohn had discussed eloping and had even chosen names for their potential children. Gypsy, who had 5 separate Facebook accounts, and Godejohn flirted online. Their exchanges sometimes using stuff, I'm talking about explicit stuff, um, which Gypsy has since claimed to be more what he was interested in. Aaliyah tried to talk her out of it, still thinking Gypsy was too young and possibly being taken advantage of by a sexual predator. She considered Gypsy's plans just fantasies, dreams, and nothing like this would ever really take place. Despite Dee Dee's efforts to prevent her from using the internet, um, which went as far as destroying her daughter's phone and laptop, Gypsy maintained contact with Aaliyah, who saved printouts of her posts since until 2014. The next year, Gypsy arranged and also paid for Go to John to meet her mother in Springfield. Her plan was for him to casually bump into her while she and Dee Dee were at the movie theater. Both of them in costume, and apparently struck up a relationship that way. And then later, for her to introduce him to her mother. As soon as they did meet in person for the first time, Go John says Gypsy led him to the bathroom where the two had, you know, and the two continued their internet interactions and began developing their plan to kill Dee Dee. Murder. Go to John returned to Springfield in June 2015, arriving while Gypsy and her mother were away at a doctor's appointment. After they had returned home and Dee Dee had gone to sleep, he went to the Blanchard house and Gypsy let him in. Allegedly gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife, with the understanding that he would use it to murder Dee Dee. Gypsy hid in the bathroom and covered her ears so that she would not have to hear her mother screaming. Go to John then stabbed Dee Dee 17 times in the back while she was asleep. Afterward, the two had in Gypsy's room. They took $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee had been keeping in the house, mostly Rod's child support checks, and then fled to a motel outside Springfield, where they stayed for a few days while planning their next move. And during that time, they were seen on security cameras at several stores. And Gypsy said at the point she believed the two had gotten away with the crime. They mailed the murder weapon back to Go to John's home in Wisconsin to avoid being caught with it. Then took a bus there. Several witnesses who saw the pair on their way to the Greyhound station noticed that Gypsy wore a blonde wig and was walking unassisted. After seeing concerning Facebook statuses posted from Dee Dee's, sorry y'all, I keep hitting this thing. This ring light at the bottom of it. Posted from Dee Dee's account, the Blanchards' friends suspected something was amiss. When phone calls went unanswered and several friends and neighbors went to the house, while friends and neighbors knew that the two often left on medical trips unannounced, they saw Dee Dee's modified car still in the driveway, making an unannounced trip unlikely. The protective film on the windows made it hard to see inside and low light, and no one answered the door. So the gathered friends called 911, and when the police arrived, they had to wait for a search warrant to be issued before they could enter. Um, but they were allowed, but they allowed one of the neighbors present to climb through a window where he saw that the inside of the house was largely undisturbed and Gypsy's wheelchair was still present. While the warrant was issued, when the warrant was issued, police entered the house and found Dee Dee's body. A GoFundMe account was set up to pay for funeral expenses and possibly Gypsy's. All who knew the Blanchards feared the worst. Even if Gypsy had not been harmed, they believed that she would be helpless without her wheelchair, medications, and support equipment like oxygen tanks and the feeding tube. Um, Aaliyah, who was among the gathered on the Blanchard's lawn, told police that she knew about Gypsy and the secret boyfriend. She showed them the printouts that she had saved, which included his name. Based on the information, police asked Facebook to trace the IP address from which the post to Dee Dee's account had been made. It turned out to be in Wisconsin, and the next day, police agencies in Waukesha County, I hope I'm saying that right, um, raided the Go to John's Big Bend home, and Go to John and Gypsy surrendered and were taken into custody on charges of murder and felony armed criminal action. The news that Gypsy was safe was greeted with relief in Springfield, where she and Go to John were soon extradited to and held on $1 million bond. But in the announcing of the news, Greene County Sheriff Jim Arnott warned, things are not always as they appear. The media in Springfield soon reported the truth of the Blanchards' lives and that Gypsy had never been sick and had always been able to walk. But her mother had her pretend otherwise, using physical abuse to control her. Jim Arnott urged people not to donate any money to the family until investigators learned the extent of the fraud. The trials. After the disclosure of how Dee Dee had treated Gypsy, sympathy for her as a victim of a violent murder um, rapidly shifted to a daughter as a long-term victim of child abuse. While the charge of first-degree murder can carry the death penalty under Missouri law or life without parole, County Prosecutor Dan Patterson announced that he would not seek it for either Gypsy or Go to John, calling the case extraordinary and unusual. After her attorney obtained her medical records from Louisiana, he secured a plea bargain to second-degree murder for Gypsy. Gypsy was so undernourished up to this point during the year she was in county jail. Her lawyer told BuzzFeed that she had gained 14 pounds. In contrast to most of his clients who typically lose weight in that situation. In July 2015, she accepted a plea bargain and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Go John still faced more severe charge because prosecutors contended that he initialed the murder plot, and he and Gypsy agreed that he was the one who killed Dee Dee. He was also severely prosecuted due to the different personal circumstances. Go John was granted less sympathy and understanding due to the lack of involvement in the abuse. And Gypsy's plea bargain agreement did not require her to testify against him. In January 2017, his trial was postponed when prosecutors requested a second psychiatric exam, and his lawyers contend that his intelligence quotient of 82 was on the autism spectrum, suggesting that his diminished capacity and he initially waived his right to a trial by jury, but changed his mind in June of that year. In December 2017, a judge set Gator John's trial for November 2018. In their opening statement, prosecutors alleged that Gator John had deliberated for over a year before the crime, while his lawyers pointed to his autism and said that Gypsy had formulated a crime and their love-struck client had just done as she had asked. The next day, the prosecutors showed jurors text messages, sometimes sexually explicit. The Gypsy and Goto John shared in the week before the murder, after using various personas as well as a knife that he had used to commit the murder. Um, in some of the texts, he asked her for details about Dee Dee's room and sleeping habits, and they were supplemented by a video of his interview with police after the arrest, where he admitted killing her. Gypsy testified on the trial's third day, and she said that while she indeed suggested to go to John to kill Dee Dee to end her mother's abuse, she had also considered getting pregnant by him in the hopes that once she was carrying Go to John's child, Dee Dee would have to accept him. Along with the knife that she had gave to Go to John, she stole baby clothes from Walmart um, during a shopping trip so she could go ahead with either plan. However, she said Go to John never told her what he thought about the pregnancy plan. After 4 days, the case was sent to the jury. Jurors had the option of finding Go John guilty of one of three murder charges: involuntary manslaughter, second degree, or first degree murder, or not guilty of any of them. After approximately 2 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict, and Go John was found guilty of first degree murder and armed criminal action. In November 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder conviction. The only possible option, since prosecutors had declined to seek the death penalty, and Governor John asked Judge David Jones for leniency on the armed criminal action charge, which carries a minimum sentence of only 3 years, saying that he had fallen blindly in love with Gypsy, and he received a sentence of 25 years on that charge, which is concurrent with the life sentence. Jones also denied the motion by Go John's lawyer, Dwayne Perry, for a new trial. Perry argued that the jury should not have been allowed to hear that Go John had considered raping Dee Dee on the night of the murder, and also argued that the state's psychologist should not have been allowed to testify, while Go John's psychologist should have, to establish that they had diminished capacity. In denying the motion, Jones conceded that an appeals court could find the latter part significant and reconsider it a reversible error. Venture's neighbors were shocked to learn that Gypsy's illnesses were fabricated. Aaliyah, whose information about Gypsy's relationship with Go John led police to the couple the day after Dee Dee's body was discovered. She cried out in disbelief upon hearing that Gypsy had never been sick or disabled. Her mother recalled that how everyone had accepted Dee Dee's claims without asking for proof, and wondered if the mother and daughter had, had secretly been laughing at the neighbors' um, naivety. Kim Blanchard, no relation to them, Gypsy or Dee Dee, um, who had called the deputy sheriffs to the house the night before, said, "We have been believing. What have we been believing? How could I have been so stupid?" Over 60 people attended a candlelight vigil for Dee Dee in downtown Springfield the night after the body was discovered. In a news conference, Jim Art said of the case, "Springfield is a giving community. We are surrounded we surrounded people with love and finances that we believe actually needed it. However, a lot of times we are deceived." And I think it is now so true in this case at hand. Only one of the charities that had helped the Blanchards spoke about spoke after the revelations. The spokesman for for Humanity, whose volunteers helped build the Blanchards' house, along with others, on their street, said, "We are really deeply saddened by the whole situation." Dee Dee's family in Louisiana had also confronted her about the treatment of Gypsy years before. "Do not mourn her. Her father, stepmother, and nephew were the um, who first shared details of Gypsy's actual health when she first started using a wheelchair. When she first started using a wheelchair, all later said that Dee Dee deserved her fate and that Gypsy had been punished as much